honor to introduce Ozzy Barak, who is the CEO of PowerPlay. Ozzy, this is really an honor because my previous life, I'm a reformed educator, and I didn't even make it in the classroom but for 6 months. But what you're doing and teaching children through games is amazing. So let's hear for Ozzy.
I don't need this. I have my own mic. Hi, everyone. I want to speak today about video games, as you heard. And I wanted to ask you to do a quick survey here. How many of you are playing video games? Okay, we have like 20%, I would estimate. How many of you are concerned that kids, whether it's your family or friends, playing too much video games? Okay, we have more of those. But, still a good crowd. I mean, I hear so much negative remarks, and I see negative perception about video games that I almost feel like an ambassador, that my role is through the work we're doing and people in our community are doing is to convince people that video games could be an amazing medium that could be used for artistic purposes, for personal expression, and to change the world. So I wrote a book about this with Laura Parker, who is a reporter for the New York Times and The Guardian. And we have the privilege to be on stage tomorrow because we're part of Gary's club. This is like the book club of CES. Every year they choose 10 books. And I don't think that Robin is here, but I want to thank her for the reference. So this is exciting for us. The book came out in January, but it's really what I'm going to speak about today, basically the history of how I started with this, but also how this whole movement of games for change, games for impact came to be. So the beginning is pretty modest. We have a little game about peace that begins in a small place called Israel. It's so small that the yellow dot on the screen is covering like 3 neighboring countries. And this is where I grew up. More than 30 years I lived in Israel. I moved to the US in 2004. And I was in, like any Israeli living in this very intense place that also has, especially in Tel Aviv, the characteristics of a bubble. You need to kind of protect yourself from what's going on around, because otherwise you can't really survive in the sense of the breaking news. I mean, maybe in America you have some of that experience in the last year, but you live with it your whole life. And then, even if you think that you're protected, this is a real drawing that I did when I was 5 years old, and my mother kept. So just that you see that if I compare it to my own kids at that age, I was drawing national symbols and conflict and airplanes and tanks. My kids today draw flowers, houses, and princesses. And then, let's say that 18 years, you didn't turn on the radio, you try to avoid the TV, any news, you're apolitical. At 18, you go to the army. Men go for 3 years. At least, that's the mandatory service, and women for 2 years. I served 5 altogether. I was a captain, and I was in the intelligence corps. So a lot of what you'll hear very soon about video games came from that background of, being in the military, kind of very deep understanding of the conflict. And if you think about it in the intelligence, what you actually know more about is the other side. You're trying to understand the other perspective. You're trying to figure out what they think about, what are their goals, their agenda. And this is what I grew up with. Then after 5 years, this is me, by the way, if you didn't recognize. After 5 years, I left the army. I decided to go on a journey from one small place to another. Went to Pittsburgh, became a Steelers fan as well. But the real purpose for me to go to Pittsburgh was to go to Carnegie Mellon. Back then, It was one of the first programs in the country that was focusing on video games, and it's called the Entertainment Technology Center. And it was started by two guys, one from drama and one from computer science. And that's the whole premise. People with right brain, left brain. The idea that you bring designers with engineers. You bring artists with computer scientists. And the guy that, one of the guys that started this program is called Randy Pausch. Anyone knows the story of Randy? Does it ring a bell? The last lecture? So I don't have time to go into it, but I really want to just bookmark it. I really recommend you guys to look for the last lecture. This is a lecture that Randy did when he was 46 years old. He knew that he's going to die in six months of cancer that there's no cure for. And he made a very, very optimistic, full of passion, basically saying to the audience that he achieved everything he dreamed of by the age of 46. And it was very inspirational. He turned into a phenomenon. He wrote a book. He was on Oprah twice, every talk show in the US, and he really died after 6 months. And his legacy until now is celebrated at Carnegie Mellon and other places. When I met Randy, it was about getting into this field. And we had the opportunity to start our own project. And I came to Randy and the faculty and I said, look guys, I'm a bit older than most guys that come here because I served in the army and I was working a bit in Israel, so I'm super old. And I want to do this project. You should trust me because I'm a bit older than others. And it's going to be about the peace process in the Middle East. It's a video game in which you can actually bring peace between the two sides. And they looked at me and they said, this is insane. How can you do it with a group of students? It sounds so complex. Think about it, 2004, before Facebook, before mobile, video games, if now they have a negative perception, back then it was the most horrific thing you can think about. Only console, mostly males, sitting in the basement, pizza boxes, shooting monsters. And I'm coming with not only that it's a realistic game, it's a peace game. It's a game where you actually reach a resolution. I want to show you a short video of 2 minutes on how the game was perceived. We had an incredible wild ride. Because it's so counterintuitive, the faculty let us explore. Very soon it got out to the press and the media, and it got kind of global attention at that time. And we started a company and basically sold the game in 60 countries, self-published it. Peacemaker is a game in which you take the role of one of the leaders. You can take either the role of the Israeli Prime Minister or the Palestinian President. You can play both perspectives. And the idea is that as the leader, you have to react to real-time events happening in the world. You can negotiate with other leaders, but you also have security or military actions that you can take. And by doing so, you have to reach a peaceful solution while in office.
In an Israeli high school, a new computer game called Peacemaker was launched today. Children playing the role of Israeli and Palestinian leaders trying to make peace in a virtual world of suicide bombings and Israeli military strikes.
We don't expect to address all issues of the conflict. We don't expect to give all the answers. We're bringing up issues for discussion.
I think the best aspect of playing this game is that, especially if you're a Palestinian student in the territories or an Israeli student within Israel, you get a chance to really feel what both sides are thinking and get a better sense of what they can do together to work towards peace.
If you look at the video game industry today, there are so many games out there about violence, about war, about destructions. We say a simple thing: there is certainly
a place for one little game about peace.
So this is me, very young and naive. But it was a great experience, and it was one of the first video games in the Games for Change movement that got a lot of this type of attention and spotlight. And it was also, I think, going back, looking back at the game itself, there were three things that made it really interesting. One was that it was in 3 languages, that we were really stubborn to get it in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. The other one was the 2 perspectives. So it's actually 2 games in one, because you can play either the Israeli side or the Palestinian side, and they're different, they're asymmetric, because obviously Palestinians are under occupation and very limited in their resources. And then the third thing was, as you saw, the real footage. So everything in the game was licensed from Reuters. When we went to Reuters to say we want to license it for a video game, it was the first time someone ever came to them and said that we want to use, videos and photos to put in a game like this. The game, as I said, we packaged it, we sold it, it got reviews. It was very tough commercially, obviously, but we had a few moments that were very interesting. One of them, I'm going to show you a video now, where a general in Israel is playing the game on national TV. Maybe if I could advise him before, I wouldn't advise it, but this is what he did. So he plays live, he's narrating it, you'll see it in Hebrew, and he's basically making choices. We can lower a bit the volume because you won't understand the Hebrew. I can kind of talk over it, but you'll see how, but before I show it to you, maybe a guess how much time it took him to lose the game? 5 minutes. Exactly 5 minutes.
דיפלומטיה.
דני יתום בינתיים ממשיך לשחק כראש ממשלת ישראל, פותח במשא ומתן עם הפלסטינים.
אני פונה אליו, ואני
So
אומר לו,
this is Dani Yatom, he's ex-head of the Mossad in Israel. He was part of the negotiation.
לא ממש עובד במשחק.
הפסדת האינתיפאדה השנייה שלי.
Part of the negotiation team of Israel with the Palestinians.
כי המחשב החליט שהפסדתי, למרות שלדעתי נקטתי בכל הפעולות. אי אפשר ללמוד מן המשחק הזה על המציאות בשום פנים ואופן.
The first event he sees is a suicide bomb. This is how we programmed the game, that the first thing you see is very violent. Then he took a series of military actions, one after the other. And then the reporter is asking him, he says, it's a peace game, maybe you should try something else. And he goes to the diplomacy menu and he chooses the action that says, demand concessions from the other side, or something like that. Loses the game. The third intifada goes up on the screen, like you saw, and he's like completely, taken off by that. And then the reporter is saying, so what do you think? What do you think about the game? Is it realistic? And he says, look, this game is completely unrealistic. You cannot learn anything from this game about reality because I did all the right things. So we understood that the future is not with the generals and the politicians, the future is with the kids. And we were very lucky to do this deal with the Peres Center. Shimon Peres is the late president of Israel. He was also prime minister. He started this NGO 10 years ago. And this NGO works with Israelis and Palestinians. They came to us, they bought 100,000 copies of the game. We shipped them to Israel, and they put them in newspapers for subscribers for free, and also taught in classes for many years in both Israel and the West Bank. From there, I went on to be the executive director of Games for Change, which is the organization that is trying to foster this community, kind of a Sundance for video games for good. And it was a great experience, and it's a non-profit that is headquartered in New York. And just like Kids at Play, as this conference, we have one every year, 1,000 people. At one point, we were partnering with Tribeca, with the film festival. And there, I had the opportunity to help others. And some of those are real pioneers in the field. And I'm not going to go into them. They're all, this is basically the book is those stories of those entrepreneurs, those people that kind of paved the way and try to, just like Peacemaker, try to do something completely different. But you'll be surprised that one of them is Sandra Day O'Connor. So if you'll go today, the Supreme Court Justice, if you'll go today to icivics.org, you will find 20 video games around civic education that are now played by 50% of teachers in social studies in the US in middle school level. 50%. So it became, over time, so successful and so effective that they use it. You have a Saudi prince, you have brain scientists, but again, we won't go into that. What we'll go into is the future. So I want to speak quickly about what's next. Like, we spoke about games, about shifting perspectives and knowledge and awareness, but where are we going really cutting edge and you know, things that we'll see in the next 10 years? The first one is neurogaming, neuroscience games. There is a brain scientist, you can see him also in this slide, second bottom on the left, a brain scientist that one day had a dream that he needs to make a video game. His expertise was in fighting dementia and fighting mental decline. And one day, out of the blue, he decided he needs to make this video game. He had this idea in his mind, and he made a video game that is a racing game, basically, where you need to multitask. And because he has this deep expertise, because he's not coming from gaming, he's coming from science, he thought that the actions that are taken in the game are going to transfer into real effects on memory and prevention of mental decline. He went on, he did a clinical trial that was very successful and even surprised him because the results of 1 month of play, and we're talking about 3 sessions a week or 3 to 5 sessions a week of 1 hour, we're talking about seniors, we're talking about old people playing a video game. 1 month of those sessions had effect for 6 months on memory, cognition, focus, and what he's doing now, which is very interesting, those guys raised $30 million and he's trying to get FDA approval. Now, if he's going to get FDA approval for this game, and now they're also going on other verticals, including for kids, ADHD and other conditions, if he's going to get FDA approval, you're basically going to have a game, by the way, they phrase it as digital medicine, that a doctor can give someone to play with prescription. So it would give a kid, or it would give an older person a tablet and say, you need to play it 1 hour, at least 5 times a week, over a month to get the right effects, without taking any drug or anything like that.
Test out a virtual reality.
This is a video that I want to show that is in VR, but it's the same idea. And this idea is pretty groundbreaking because it's real-time effect. We're not talking about I'm playing a video game and I have some after effect. This is really influencing you and your nerves and your emotions in real time.
Test out a virtual reality pain management tool called Snow World. Josh demonstrates how it works. Looking through high-tech goggles, he launches snowballs at penguins and snowmen through an icy canyon as Paul Simon plays. Immersed in this Arctic environment,
that triggers the memory of cold.
Josh says he forgot about the painful daily cleaning and dressing of his wounds.
It was the only time that I actually did not feel pain.
The doctor says his study shows Snow World decreased burn patients' pain and the need for heavy pain medication.
So this is, again, just like medicine, but it's not medicine. Please trust me with what I'm showing you, both with Adam Gazeli and this project. Robust research, clinical trials over years. This is not brain games that you are used to see and have a very bad and negative perception. This is real science done by the best in the field. The next thing I want to speak about, if we're in VR, is VR for empathy. I'm going to show you a short clip from a UN-commissioned experience taking you to a refugee camp in Jordan.
There are more kids in Zaatari than adults right now. Sometimes I think we are the ones in charge.
what you have here is a shortcut. I'm taking you to another world.
I think being here for
But
a year
unlike
and
a
half
shortcut
has
to
been
take you
not
to
enough.
Barcelona, instead of being there physically, I'm taking you to a place that physically you probably cannot visit
I
at
will
all.
not be 12 forever.
And it's a very, I mean, obviously we're not seeing it at VR now, but the idea that the refugee girl is taking you in this camp and showing you around
teacher says
and
the
showing you her
clouds
brother and how
over
she
us
lives,
also
this is
paint
something that you can do it today only in VR at that level.
Someday, the
Last
clouds
thing, that will be the last
turn.
video that I'll show you, the last trend, esports. How many people heard about electronic sports, competitive video games? This is the new hype in video games, the idea that what you see here is Madison Square Garden with 10,000 people, full, sold out in one day. By the way, this is a project I had the privilege to be part of, bringing Riot, League of Legends, and MSG together, watching a video game. The only people playing are 5 against 5 on the stage. All the other people in this arena are watching, cheering, and I'll show you 45 seconds.
It's a really cool experience to have every person around you like the thing that you like.
It really has changed my life. I absolutely love this game.
It's one of those games that whether we're having a good day or a bad day, we know if we play, we're going to have a good time and we're going to be better off for it.
By the way, when you see the people in the audience, millions are watching it online on Twitch and other platforms, especially kids. Why it's interesting for social impact? Just like sports and the Olympics are interesting for social impact and bringing people together, we're breaking the notion that video games are played at the basement. This is a social, physical experience, people coming together to celebrate their passion. Thank you very much.